So Tracy woke up earlier than I did, which is usually the case, and I'm hearing her with one eye open, and she's like, "You're going to have to read the news very soon because there's something big going on here." This was very significant indeed. So I did get up, made a coffee, read the article, and I thought, good Lord, this is very significant news indeed.
Bombshell claims from a military whistleblower. UFO wreckage recovered by the U.S. kept classified by a secret government program for decades. Tonight, a world television exclusive you will only see on NewsNation. Welcome to Elizabeth Vargas Reports, earning your trust every night. UFOs exist. The U.S. government found quite a number of them, and they are indeed of non-human origin. Those are the explosive allegations from a former intelligence officer tonight in a whistleblower complaint that the Inspector General is taking very seriously. 36-year-old Air Force veteran David Grusch is exposing what he calls a top-secret military program that has reportedly found wreckage of fully intact UFOs. The government now calls them UAPs, or unidentified anomalous phenomena. For years, there have been whispers and rumors that the government had aircraft of non-human origin. This report is the first evidence it might be true. The Inspector General has called Grusch's complaint urgent and credible. Tonight, we have a world television exclusive interview with the whistleblower in which he claims we not only have the aircraft, but the government has been keeping much of it secret from Congress and from the public. NewsNation senior national correspondent Brian Enton is here with the story, and this is a blockbuster.
It is a blockbuster. It's really hard to wrap your mind around this. I've been working on this for the past couple of weeks. I'm still having a hard time processing all of it. Over the last couple of years, it sort of became mainstream to discuss UFOs. The government has released videos. They've acknowledged that we don't know what some of this stuff is out there that we have on camera, but this really takes it all to another level. For the very first time, the world is about to hear from a former high-level U.S. intelligence officer who says the government has some of the unidentified craft in its possession. He is revealing these exclusive details about the secret government program.
We're going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Oh my gosh, dude. Wow.
We have all seen these blurry videos of unidentified flying objects, video evidence, if you will, that old tales of UFOs may not all be conspiracy theories. In recent years, Congress starting an official U.S. government unidentified aerial phenomena task force, recently renamed the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or AARO. And now in a NewsNation exclusive, David Grusch, an Air Force veteran, former member of that task force, and veteran of the National Geospatial-Intelligence Agency, is formally blowing the whistle on secrets he says no one has ever shared publicly before.
You are one of the most trusted former intelligence officials in the U.S. defense and intelligence establishment.
Yes, I was.
You were trusted with the most intimate secrets.
Yes.
Grusch sitting down with award-winning investigative journalist Ross Coulthart, who's reporting for NewsNation and has spent years reporting on the UFO question.
What conclusion did you come to at the end of your time on the UAP task force?
The UAP task force was refused access to a broad crash retrieval program.
When you say crash retrieval, what do you mean?
These are retrieving non-human origin technical vehicles, call it spacecraft if you will, non-human, exotic origin vehicles that have either landed or crashed.
We have spacecraft from another species.
We do, yeah.
How many?
Quite a number.
You're kidding.
No. I thought it was totally nuts, and I thought at first I was being deceived. It was a ruse. People started confiding in me. They approached me. I have plenty of current and former senior intelligence officers that came to me, many of which I knew almost my whole career, that confided in me they were a part of a program. They named the program. I've never heard of it. And they told me, based on their oral testimony, and they provided me documents and other proof, that there was, in fact, a program that the UAP task force was not read into.
Grusch alleges the U.S. government has recovered non-human craft for decades. He's filed a whistleblower complaint saying he gave what he calls the classified proof to Congress and the Intelligence Community Inspector General. NewsNation has confirmed David Grusch's credentials and resume. We've not seen or verified the alleged proof he says he's provided to investigators. He says he can't show us the proof for national security reasons. He also tells us he's not seen photos of the alleged craft himself, but has talked extensively with other intelligence officials who have.
If you're right, if you're telling us the truth, everyone, the entire American public, has been lied to for decades.
Yeah, there's a sophisticated disinformation campaign targeting the U.S. populace, which is extremely unethical and immoral.
You are saying to the human race, for the first time, an official intelligence representative at a high level from the U.S. government is saying publicly, we are not alone.
We're definitely not alone. Absolutely, the data points empirically that we're not alone, yeah.
Do we have bodies? Do we have species of
Well,
non-human?
naturally, when you recover something that's either landed or crashed, sometimes you encounter dead pilots. And believe it or not, as fantastical as that sounds, it's true.
It's also harder for people to wrap their minds around the concept of a crashed object from somewhere else. It's easier to accept that, yeah, we see things in the sky that we can't explain.
Journalist Leslie Kean broke Grusch's whistleblower story this morning in the debrief. Ms. Kean's career has been mainstream and credible, having written a series of reports on UFOs in the New York Times dating back to 2017.
He has the credentials, but there's no documents that he's handed over. There's no pictures. And as a journalist, you want to see documents, you want to see pictures. Does that raise a red flag?
Not at all, Brian. I mean, you mean documents that actually describe the craft?
Correct, yeah, like government documents, or to be able to see it for ourselves.
Of course. Don't we all want that? And the problem with that is all of that information is classified. You know, as we said in the story, everything that Grusch told Congress and told the Inspector General of both the IC, the Intelligence Community Inspector General, and the Department of Defense Inspector General, all of that information is classified.
In 2017, Kean reported exclusively in the New York Times that the Pentagon had a secret UFO program. 3 years later, the Pentagon confirmed her story. Her latest report is even more explosive, but Kean says she has multiple sources who back up Grusch's story.
I believe it because of all the sources I have who have told me the same thing. So who am I to doubt these very, very high-level people who have been inside these programs for decades, have done their work, and are all telling me the same thing? I mean, I don't think there's some kind of conspiracy among all these people who don't know each other to make something like this up.
So I've got to be blunt about this. Yeah. You're not making this up. This is not a lie.
No, absolutely not.
Because everybody watching this right now is looking at your face. Mm-hmm. They're going, is this guy for real?
I am for real. And I'm sitting here at great personal risk and obvious professional risk by talking to you today.
And just within the last 10 minutes or so, the Pentagon has released a statement to NewsNation about this report. They say to date, AARO has not discovered any verifiable information to substantiate claims that any programs regarding the possession or reverse engineering of extraterrestrial materials have existed in the past or exist currently. AARO is committed to following the data and its investigation wherever it leads. AARO, working with the Office of the General Counsel and the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, has established a safe and secure process for individuals to come forward with information to aid AARO in its congressionally mandated historical review. AARO's historical review of records and testimonies is ongoing and due to Congress by June 2024, and AARO welcomes the opportunity to speak with any former or current employee or contractor who believes they have information relevant to this historical review. And Elizabeth, we know that David Grusch, he's filed that whistleblower complaint. He's been on the record under oath testifying to many of these things that he said in our report tonight.
Right, and it's important to point out that this statement from the Pentagon from AARO, Grusch is alleging that this top secret program is keeping it a secret from AARO. So.
Yeah, exactly. And if Grusch what he's saying is true, the spokespeople, all of those folks at that level wouldn't even know this was going on anyway.
All right, I got to ask you, he has a compelling story to tell. Very little of it seems like firsthand knowledge. Isn't he just repeating what somebody else has told him or somebody else has showed him?
Yes, that is what he's doing, but he says he's talked to a number of people who are in very, very high-level positions. He also had basically the highest level of classified material information that he was able to receive. We went back and checked over, his history, all of his credentials. Check out completely. Unfortunately, there's
in addition, a couple people have come forward publicly to vouch for him, people who are high-ranking. They have, and this article first came out this morning, and I think it's interesting that, there hasn't been any sort of effort to discredit what he has said either from the Defense Department. So interesting. So what happens, and have we had any reaction, by the way, from members of Congress who have been taking this seriously in the last couple of years? We've seen congressional hearings, we've seen NASA's hearing just about a week ago on UFOs or UAPs, whatever you prefer to call them. We've seen the DNI give a briefing to the White House on this. We've been hearing whispers and rumors for years. I remember even former President Trump, when he was in office, sort of saying, oh my gosh, if you knew what I knew about UFOs. Yeah. So there's always been this intrigue. There has, and think about it, Elizabeth, if you go back 15 or 20 years, if we were sitting here talking about UFOs, people would think that we were nutty. Now it's gotten to the level of where it is somewhat accepted because the government has come forward to a certain extent and acknowledged that there are these videos that exist. The Navy has released the videos themselves and said, we're not sure exactly what this is that we're seeing. Of course, what Grusch is saying really just sort of takes it to the next level. Boy, it sure does. It's almost impossible to believe. All right, Brian Nenton, thanks so much. And former Navy fighter pilot Lieutenant Ryan Graves joins us now. He was the first active duty pilot to testify before Congress about his squadron's experience with UAPs. He also founded Americans for Safe Aerospace to encourage other pilots to come forward. Lieutenant Graves, always great to have you on the show. First, just your reaction to what we've just heard.
Yeah, quite the incredible statements that were made public today. David has had a lot of experience, and he's made some pretty strong statements. My understanding is that this has been properly communicated to Congress and other stakeholders in government, and so that really puts the onus now on Congress to be able to move this information forward, hopefully to the American people. The whistleblower complaint alleges that not only has our government had these craft of, quote, non-human origin, but that it's keeping it secret. And for decades, the Air Force discredited sightings of UAPs by pilots like you. Does it sound possible to you that that kind of secrecy is still happening, this kind of disinformation, this time around aircraft? Well, that just seems to be the case. I've been reporting on unidentified objects since 2014 and 2015 off of the coast of Virginia Beach. And still, that conversation hasn't elevated to the point where pilots still feel comfortable reporting. So, yes, I still believe that there is secrecy and stigma associated with this topic. And this conversation that we're having today, I think, is a massive step in the right direction. Can you describe exactly what you saw when you were flying in the air that night? Certainly. We were seeing dark gray or black cubes inside of clear spheres, and we were seeing these all over our working areas on a near daily basis, sometimes coming as close as 500 feet to our aircraft as we were flying our operations. We were seeing this not only off the eastern seaboard, but we were seeing this down south off Jacksonville, Florida, as well as off the west coast. Now, with the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office reporting that we're seeing spheres globally that are proceeding from 0 to 2 Mach on a regular basis, we still haven't really figured out what those objects are. And you, largely to your efforts and a few others, and people are now speaking out, pilots are now speaking out. But in general, especially a couple of years ago, but you say even now still to a certain extent, what are pilots told when they come back and say, oh my God, look at what I saw and what I recorded in my cockpit camera? Yeah, a lot of times it doesn't even get to that point, unfortunately, Elizabeth. Pilots aren't taking it back to their companies, to their safety offices and reporting this. Typically what I'm hearing from aircrew that are calling reporting is that they're seeing objects, they're typically reporting it to air traffic control, and that's really where the conversation ends. There'll be a number of other aircraft that will report the same thing in the same vicinity, but there's no further action taken. But it was a bit disappointing to hear the... Go ahead. Hear the FAA chief talk. It was a little disappointing to hear the FAA representative at the latest public meeting that the NASA independent study team had stated that he was only familiar with maybe 4 or 5 reports of UAP from their FAA controllers. I'm personally hearing reports from pilots that they're seeing objects on almost a nightly basis off the Northern Pacific as well as Northern Atlantic.
Almost a nightly
and that's
basis?
Been happening for several months. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, if these non-human craft are in fact flying around the Earth on almost a nightly basis, would it make sense to you that one or more of these would crash or land?
Well, that's the assumption that we have to make if David's story is 100% true. If these objects are flying around, that have been for a number of years, the assumption would be that they would likely crash at some point and that there would be an operation to retrieve it.
A former staff director of the Senate Intelligence Committee is publicly calling on the government to reveal what it has. He says he's spoken to 4 witnesses who say the same thing that you do, that Grusch says, that we have material from non-human craft, and he writes, we must know the facts concealing such vital information. If we are not alone, this poses a huge barrier to successfully adapting to the world around us. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. Not only we're not able to adapt to the reality around us, but there's all sorts of potential concern for miscommunication or identification in war zones, potential safety hazards with air traffic, and just the reality that we're just not ready for something potentially if it is happening around us, if we're not willing to acknowledge it.
This former staff director also writes that there is a pattern, a persistent pattern of surveillance around Department of Defense test ranges and around nuclear sites. First, have you heard of that? And if so, wouldn't this also make this a matter of national security?
I have to insist that it does. These are being detected around training ranges and places of national security, such as nuclear facilities. Additionally, we can see that there is some level of repeatability and congregation of these objects in those areas, and that should be a cause for concern. Some of the work that we're doing at the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics is related around the detection and sensing of these objects, and there are patterns that can be pulled out, and we are seeing them conglomerate mostly around training ranges and military operation areas.
Do you believe Grusch's claims?
It's not about trusting him. It's the fact that he's brought evidence forward that we can now go through and verify, and that's now in the hands of Congress to be able to go and verify that story. His story is believable, and I think it's now up to Congress to verify it and then communicate the results of that to the American people.
All right. Lieutenant Ryan Graves, always great to have you here. Thanks so much for weighing in on this. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right. Coming up, switching gears.
Whoa. First of all, can you hear this? That was live. That was all live. Everything, none of this is pre-record. A huge hand to the AV crew that moved a mountain to make this happen.
Great.
They're back there. That was amazing for being on the spot to make this all happen. That was just unbelievable. Thank you, guys. Yeah. And
we just got this morning that I've been in conversation with them during the morning, and we've been in conversation for a number of weeks, actually. That Dave actually went to the Senate Intelligence Committee and gave them this information from the 4th, 5th, and 6th of April. And then I'm not at liberty to talk about the details of this, but let me say, I knew this as of the 10th of April. And that this effort to try to get it put forward is part of how many of you were at the panel the other night?
Which panel?
The disclosure panel that we had, that we began talking about this at that time, that there was this effort on the part of some people inside the highest levels of government to get this information out, and there was a pushback. Susan Gao, who the quote, the big long quote you saw, from them saying that they have no evidence that there's ever been any kind of craft recovered, etc. I mean, that's just a flat lie, and that's consistent with the program that they've had in place for like 75 years. It was like Oliver North in the Iran-Contra case when he just flat lied to Congress and said that no, there was no evidence whatsoever that we were secretly shipping weapons to the Contras, and he flat out lied under oath to Congress. And then when he got caught on it, that we actually, our office, the Romero Institute, that runs the New Paradigm project that we're working on here about all this, that when we got that exposed and the special prosecutor was appointed and dragged Oliver North in front of the Congress, he just said, well, sure, I lied to you. It was a covert program. You're not entitled to it. Like the executive branch is like the government, they think. Whereas the Congress of the United States, whom we elect, is the government. And so what you see here, you see live here today, Susan Gao from the Pentagon and the executive branch lying, saying that they have no evidence whatsoever about this. But you got David Grusch now asserting not only the details of it, but he's provided to the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence hundreds of pages of previously and still classified documents showing the details of this type of a program.
I just want to point out, this is a really good point you're making, that this is a battle, on one level, a battle between these two branches of government, where Congress has been really pushed to the side for such a long time, and with the growth of such executive power. But it is, I think, totally legit to see this in part as a battle between Congress and the executive.
It's a struggle, and for example, during the Iran-Contra case, when they were confronted about what they were doing, that Congress had passed a law totally prohibiting the executive branch, Defense Department, and any intelligence agencies from providing any military assistance to the Contras, the former, authoritarian fascist government down in Nicaragua that had been deposed and were caught by the international courts mining the harbors of them, which was a violation of international law, and they were declared international criminals. That government fell and went into exile, and the Congress passed a law, the Boland Amendment, explicitly and emphatically prohibiting the Defense Department and any of the intelligence agencies, the executive branch, from providing any assistance to them. And when we caught them doing it and put them under oath, what Oliver North said is, well, wait a second, the Congress may have the authority to decide to control the purse strings of providing funds, but if we in the executive branch can get money somewhere else, we can do whatever we want. We can mount any kind of foreign policy that we want to. All they do is control the funding. And so that they went to the Brunei. They went to the Sultan of Brunei to get millions of dollars, and then just undertook an operation of their own. That's sort of what we see happening here, that the executive branch has been engaged in this kind of super covert program now for decades, and they've been lying flat out to Congress, and they're still lying to Congress. And so this is what you've seen live here today in this 15 minutes that we've all witnessed together real time, is what we've been talking about here all weekend. But it's happened right here, live today.
Totally unexpected.
Yeah.
Ruined my morning. I had a whole plan, and then they changed it. I think I got to wonder how Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick feels right now. He's like, those bastards sold me out. I mean, he really must feel pretty bad. After what he just said, no evidence of anything anomalous and so forth, and here we go with this.
It's not all that clear that he's been trying that hard. That's one of the issues here. Later in the same article, for the detail that actually broke this first thing at dawn this morning, was that Chris Mellon, the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence, actually stated, he said, well, the major problem is that the head of AARO, this fellow that we're talking about here, Sean Kirkpatrick, rightly or wrongly, just isn't trusted by the people who are trying to disclose all of this to believe that he really is intending on doing it. And I raised this at the panel, that the problem is that the people in the AARO office, they have not been given anywhere near an adequate budget. And in fact, they seem to be sitting in their office waiting to see if anybody comes through the door. And yet they've been charged with responsibility for getting this information, pulling this information out of the defense, the military departments, the Defense Department agencies, the intelligence agencies, and the private defense corporations, to extract this information from them and turn it over to the intelligence committees and the defense committees. And it's not at all clear that they perceive their job is really doing that. That they just perceive their job is to sit there and wait for somebody to come and tell them. So what we have happening here now is you have people who don't trust them going around that office and going directly to the intelligence committee itself and sharing the information directly with them, and then coming on national television and announcing that they've given it to them, to put the pressure on the Aero office to have to say, okay, I guess we better call him up. And get them in here. So that's what you see happening live. You can imagine, as we're here together, you can imagine what's going on in Washington, D.C. They've turned off the cameras here on this particular program, but you can imagine that they're just scurrying all around inside the Pentagon now. They're all rushing back. Probably Aero's locking its doors to keep journalists from getting in there.
And you have to wonder, I mean, what we just saw was not mainstream. What we saw was I guess, I don't know, alternative, not really alternative news, but NewsNation. So that's great that they did it. It's amazing. I'm sure it's going to get a lot of attention. There's no question. I mean, it was very professionally done, very well done. But you've got to wonder, is ABC going to take this? CNN, Fox? Like, when are they? They probably will have to cover it. I don't see how they can avoid this.
It's going to be very difficult.
It'll be very difficult. Yeah.
And Ross Galbraith, who did the interview, that I've been interviewed by Ross a number of times. He's very, very credible. We're in actual conversations. You guys are right in the real live action here. What's going on is that Mr. M, who came here to do a workshop, which nobody knew who he was, turns out that it was in fact Leo Marini. Leo Marini is in the process right now of trying to get a series authorized through Amazon Prime to have weekly shows to talk about this. That we've been in dialogue with him for a long time. Steve Bassett is being put together.
He's right over there.
A separate show.
There's Steve.
There's Steve right over there. So there's all kinds of things happening right now. You are live. This is all coming to you live for coming here to the Contact in the Desert, and there's more that is going to be going on. In fact, we're going to get together after this over in the Atlantis room, for the intensive. Which is devoted to this, okay? So you guys can all kind of just shally right on over there to the.
You're here all day, guys. You're not leaving.
Yeah, it ain't over yet.
So here's a question. I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop for the rest of the media, because I was just saying, I don't know if you were here, but I believe that we've been looking at a battle of factions over the last 5.5 years. I've never believed that we're dealing from the beginning with one concerted CIA disinformation effort to get their own disclosure out. I've never felt that way. I've always believed that you've got a hardcore secrecy always faction, and you have another faction that believes in some level of disclosure. I'm not saying it's our level, but some level. They're still very establishment-oriented people. They still believe in national security secrets and things like that, but they want some level. And that's been the battle. And I have to think that is also reflected in their influence and domination over much of the media. So what I'm really wondering, it'll be interesting to see in the next few days how the rest of the media covers this.
It's important to know that I've been on the phones with them all morning, and it turns out that they did bring it to the New York Times first.
And the Post, Washington Post also, right?
After they went to the New York Times first, because there's Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal, who actually wrote the article along with Helene Cooper back in December of 2017. So they brought it there, and that, as you may have noted, when I was on the panel, I was the one who got the telephone call when the Pentagon papers got taken. They were brought to the New York Times, and Jim Goodell, who was the chief counsel of the New York Times and executive vice president, called on the phone to me. And we're the ones that choreographed that whole process of making the decision to publish these, even though they were classified. We knew that the Nixon administration was going to come at us. They were going to go to the federal courts and try to get an injunction to stop us from doing it. We went all through that process for 13 days. Finally got the right to publish those. We had the right to publish those from the beginning, but we got the court to recognize that. Okay, so that you're going to run into something like this here, because the people that are willing now to come forward, if you start getting news outlets that are willing to step forward on this and start to publish this information, even if the Aero Office hasn't done its job and gone out and gotten the information from them, and if they try to stop them, if they try to enforce their non-disclosure agreements or their security agreements against them, the Congress of the United States has passed a law saying you can't do that. You cannot enforce those security clearance agreements or their non-disclosure agreements against them any longer, pursuant to their right to come and tell this committee. So this is really quite an event that's happening here for us.
Hey, why don't we open this up? I see some people with their hands up. Why don't we answer some questions? I see there's a person in the back row. Oh, is that JJ?
Yes, JJ.
Hi. Can you just speak up loud? I don't know if we have microphones. Just. Well said. Thank you. Any other comment? Yes, you, sir. If you speak up as loudly as possible, it would be great. We'll repeat it. They're monitoring our defense. Are we?
Are we gearing up for another forever war? You know, this has been a concern for some time. Dr. Stephen Greer, as you see, has gone on at some length, assuming all of that to be true. That what they're really doing is he's postulating that they have succeeded over time in actually back engineering some of these craft that they've recovered. And that they've discovered the secrets of the propulsion system, the navigation system, the anti-gravity system they function with, and that what they're doing is they're flying them around and test flying them, and they're going to pretend to have us invaded by an extraterrestrial species so that they can get money forever.
Blue beam, right.
Okay? And it's a classic false flag kind of operation. Is that I absolutely do not believe that.
I've never agreed with it either. Yeah. I do believe in false flags. I nearly wrote a book on it. There's a lot of them going on, but an alien invasion false flag, for all kinds of reasons, I've always seen problems with it. But I will say, if they tell us that we're being invaded by aliens, then I think that's going to be a false flag. If they actually tell us that. But earlier, when I was breaking down Leslie and Ralph's article, I just pointed out that in that article, there was a statement by, I can't remember the one gentleman's name. He was an intelligence person. He said, we need to maintain secrecy still because, the technology is being weaponized, not just by us, but by other actors.
Jonathan Grano, I think, they attributed to Jonathan Grano, that they attributed to, I think. But anyway.
Yeah. I don't remember if that was his last name. But anyway, the point was he was really laying the groundwork, I thought, for we're going to give you some information, but we could still have to keep back secrets. So you can see this narrative is forming very quickly. Even from the pro-disclosure side of it, they are still trying to create a territory where they can maintain some level of secrecy, because there's still so much of this subject. We're talking about acquired technology and possible alien bodies, but one thing that's not yet being discussed is what are they doing? Because there's sightings all over the world, hundreds, thousands every year, and that's not yet a matter of discussion. Maybe in time it will be.
Well, that's the question here, is that what are going to be the ripple effects of this information?
Right.
And many people believe that once the Pentagon had to acknowledge that UFOs were real and that they weren't swamp gas or, you know, a misidentified flock of birds or something, that this moment that we're sharing here together was going to be inevitable. Yeah. That somebody was going to say, wait a second, if they're flying all around here and they're real, has anybody ever recovered one of these things? And of course, that's what's happened now. Now that they've said this, they're going to, if they kick the tires and pound on David Grusch, all they're going to find is absolute truth. You know, this guy's telling the absolute truth. He's got the documented proof to show it. He knows the names of the people that have got all the firsthand information, and he's providing it to them. You know?
There's another question over here, ma'am.
So my question is, there's a lot of people that are taking the information, and one of them is Bigelow. He's getting a lot of the reports that are coming in. How does he play into all of this?
Robert Bigelow, you have an inside info on,
on
Bigelow?
It's even a more generic question, and that is the Aero Office going to have any type of protocol to be able to get information from the citizenry, not just the military? You know, what they've been instructed to do by the Congress that passed this law was to get the information out of all the military services, all the Defense Department agencies, all of the intelligence communities, and all of the defense contractors. Hasn't said anything yet about what about all the thousands and thousands of people that have seen these, that have said they've seen them sitting in the field next to their house, that have had contact with them, that they haven't opened that door yet. They haven't opened that door yet. Yeah, but the fact is that it's going to be very, very difficult for them to keep that closed. So what we have to see is what type of feathering in of the information do they want to undertake, and what can be done by us as citizens to put pressure on them to give more information than they are deciding through their own crafted narrative that they want to give. That's the process that's going on. And, you know, and obviously Bigelow is free to tell the rest of the world. He's got the money to do it. Here, let me show you everything everybody's told me. You know, they got MUFON has got all the kind of things. They've got tons of files. What we have to do now that the door has been kicked open a little bit and people have gotten beyond, that's the way we're going to start the intensive at 5 o'clock is starting to say, okay, now we've crossed this river. Okay, we're on the other side of the river now.
Exactly.
And so here are the different, instead of spending all of our time trying to convince each other as to what we're willing to say to other citizens to try to get them to understand that UFOs are real, that they're extraterrestrial or in some weird sense extra-dimensional or something, that they're real and that we believe that they've actually recovered some of the craft and that they're trying to back engineer these things. We've been spending virtually all of our time trying to get that to happen. Now it's happened.
I think it might be a good idea. Like 13 years ago, I did co-author a book on disclosure, and when Bryce and I wrote that, we instinctively thought, this is back in 2010, that a disclosure would happen like an avalanche. So one big leak that could not be denied would cause a whole cascading effect. Now, starting in 2017, that did not happen. What we saw was there was sufficient control over, at least in my opinion, over most of the media, that it was a very limited, controlled break. But
modified hangout.
Maybe, yeah. Well, I don't think it was, because I do think it was the result of an active movement of one faction that then received a lot of resistance. But we might now, I wonder if we're at an avalanche, a potential avalanche moment. If this story continues to have legs and other whistleblowers can come out, you really have to wonder where this will end, and that could make things really, really interesting. And the other thing I would add is this is strategy time now, because you have to assume the other side, the secrecy side, is plotting their counter moves. I can't think they're just going to walk away from the table. No. And so you got to wonder, what is the strategy of those who want to push this forward going to be? What are the likely things that the other side is going to do? There's some other hands coming up here. Should we, someone else want to just jump up? Is that Linda? Hey. All right.
Poster.
Give her a mic, yeah.
Thank you. I wonder if, in addition to the internecine warfare that has been going on between JSOC, Aero, and several offices in the Pentagon, as I have been told for several months, that one of the things that they are trying to accomplish is to keep animal mutilations by ETs, human abductions by ETs, hybridization by ETs. They want it all to be wrapped up over here while watch the pretty balls and lights and gleams, and let's keep our contact with ETs here.
Totally agree.
My own conviction is that that is a mistake. That if we are finally going to be at the decade in the century where the government of the United States is finally going to break through its lies since World War II, that it better do all of the difficult subjects. Because what I see, and I've been trying to get to the bottom of all of this for 44 years, we now are in a country in which the vast majority of people, including myself, I do not trust the government of the United States. But the reason I don't trust is that they had so many opportunities to tell the truth that would have opened up many things that they think are impossible to open up, but they are opening up anyway. And that the headlines today are going to make the door easier for everyone in all facets to now start being interviewed. Wouldn't this be the perfect time to say, we apologize, United States. We have kept this secret in respect for you as humans in a government that is supposed to be of, by, and for the people. And we didn't think you could handle it. But if they go forward now with exactly what you guys were pointing to, if this degenerates into Arrow, you stay here, NRO, you're going to take over, and everything in between is then going to be you cannot talk unless you have permission. Because that's where this today feels like. This was a great beginning. But if they don't continue with honest opening up everything, Trappist, from what I understand, I've been told for a year, we have been to the Trappist solar system. We know that Webb has evidence of artificial frequencies in planet E in the TRAPPIST-1 system. Artificial frequencies is what we generate in cities at night on Earth. If they try to have their cake and eat it too, open up a little bit about the possibility of artificial light on TRAPPIST, and they don't tell the whole story of how many solar systems we have been to with the help of the tall whites and the Nordics, we're going to be entering into a schizophrenic stage again of people who will be allowed to tell this truth, but God help you, me. Animal mutilations are a part of this. Human abductions are a part of this. Hybridization is a part of this. And I'm not trying to overtake the time here, and I apologize.
You're perfect. You're saying the exactly, I completely agree with you.
Well, and if we don't get what seems to be honest, professional truth about what the government knows about hybridization, about animal mutilations, about the fact that all around this planet, some with agreements with the government, that there are non-humans who are based on this planet, have been based on this planet for millions of years, throughout our solar system and many solar systems. In other words, is this going to be reality finally opening up?
Yeah.
Or is it going to be a whole other Broadway production in which we are only going to be allowed to see this moving ball and this moving ball? Because I love you guys, and I think that humanity deserves the whole truth, not these pieces that are selected because a government or governments, they're terrified that we are going to collapse on the sidewalk. It's crazy. Yeah. We need truth. And I'm sorry, I talked too long, but...
Linda, you were absolutely perfect.
Thank you, that was perfect.
Thank you. I just want to add and jump on. I've felt for years there's disclosure, but then there's 1,000 layers of disclosure. It's like you can be the president and say, yes, there are aliens here, and then walk out of the room and say, I'm going on vacation for 6 months. But there are 1,000 additional questions, including exactly what you're saying. So when we disclose, the answer is how much is being disclosed? What actually is the full, deep truth of everything that is happening, including mutilations, including abductions, and everything else? And or is it simply a matter of the other side playing defense and moving a little bit further down the field, but they're still holding the line on everything else?
This is exactly the subject matter of the events that will follow right after this. That the 5 o'clock intensive is directed to this particular issue. What are the questions that remain now that this question seems to be getting answered? What are the additional questions? What are the considerations that need to go into accounting for, what we do in response to when they start feathering information out? This is the discussion that we have to have. This is actually the discussion that you came here to have this weekend. And it turns out that as things have developed, it's those of you who have waited until Monday afternoon that are going to be the ones participating in this. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll probably have to break our huddle soon to move to the next one, but there is a hand up in the back there, sir. If you can speak up.
I have to ask, because you have mentioned, Mr. Sheehan, about the Allies of Humanity.
Well, that Marshall has written a series of books called The Allies of Humanity, in which he has laid out some details about this. And what he's really doing is saying that, look, there's going to come a point in time when the dam starts to break and starts to leak here, in that there's going to be a rush on the part of a lot of people, first to come rushing forward and saying, oh, good, they're going to cure cancer. They're going to figure out an alternative source of energy to substitute for oil and petroleum. We can prevent and roll back global climate change. They can get rid of nuclear weapons. There's going to be that group of our people that do that. There's going to be other people that come forward and say, oh, this is terrible. They're going to come and eat us. They're going to kill us and our children and carry off our men. This is a dynamic that's getting ready to start. What we need to do, in my opinion, those of us who have been at this for some years and gathering regularly any number of times during the course of each year to discuss these things, what we've got to do is shift gears here to turn our attention to trying to address some of these questions rather than stay trapped in the old questions. Are UFOs real? Have they got any craft? Have they been trying to back engineer them? Are they lying to us? Those are all pretty well answered now, as of this morning, okay? So what we have to do is turn our attention toward this more constructive conversation and say, what are the additional questions? I've laid out to begin with 20 questions, like the old game. We got a game of 20 questions that we're going to be playing in the events starting at 5 o'clock. Here are some of the questions. What are the answers? What do people think the answers are? How do we structure ourselves here? These structures that we have of gathering people together, once a year at the Contact in the Desert or more times, that we haven't structured ourselves in a way to really facilitate a widespread education and a widespread conversation about these issues. We have to start having those meetings and discussions now. Richard and I have been kind of talking about this. What do we set up? We have to have a 501c3 public interest operation. We have one at our Romero Institute that has done the Iran-Contra case and the Karen Silkwood case and the 3 Mile Island case and Pentagon Papers and all that stuff that we've done in the past. But what we have to do is open up and try to get as many people involved in a cooperative conversation as we possibly can to start identifying what these questions are, what the criteria are by means of which we're going to try to secure the answers to these questions, and how we're going to make some of these subjective answers to provide a protocol. The question is there anything conceivable that could be known about what the alien agenda is, that we'd have to exercise some care about how we go about revealing that to everybody? That's a question. We've all had the luxury for the last 75 years, some of us 45 years, 47 years, 50 years. We've had the luxury of saying, oh yeah, well, if we can get there, we just think that to tell them absolutely everything. Just give it to them, let's go. And we were in a position where we had the luxury to do that. We now are in a position where we're going to have to start exercising some careful thinking about how we're going to go about this. Not because we're any part of any elite or anything, but we have to figure out how we effectively get information through to people who have different worldviews, who have different levels of education, different levels of trust in government, different levels of trust in humanity. This is an extraordinarily serious conversation that we have to start. And that's why I'm inviting everybody to come at 5 o'clock and start participating in this particular conversation, because this is where it starts. Today, here, in Contact in the desert. All right, so everybody should just decide what you want to do. Just that I know that this is sort of a late-breaking event. It happens to have fit in directly with what we were going to be talking about at the Atlantis room. Yeah. But just let everybody know about what the options are, and we're going to start the conversation. It'll all be videotaped. So
we were given we're running out of time.
Okay.
All right. Looks like we're going to break.
Okay. We're going to Atlantis now. Okay.
All right, everyone. It's been wonderful. We're going to continue this adventure. It's been great. Thank you for being here.